Welcome to the module Evolution of GMP Regulations. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "If you know the why for living, you can endure anyhow." So everyone in our industry should know the story of how good manufacturing practices evolved. Most of the GMP regulations were introduced after various tragedies over the past 120 years, and now regulations are becoming more proactive. In this module, we will learn how and why various GMP regulations were evolved. I have started a series of videos on GMP, and this is the first video in the series. The topic of the next video will be revealed at the end. If you like this module, please comment and share it with your colleagues and friends, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit bell icon. So, let's start the module, and happy learning. Early in the history, there was no regulation on the manufacturing and sale of medicines. So sellers were organizing traveling medicine shows, gathering people by dance and music events, and selling bottles of pills and miracle elixir from the back of the carts. They claimed the cure of all types of diseases like aches and pains, for catarrh, rheumatism, gout, impotency and even cancer by using so-called magic elixir. Luckily, those days are long gone. The Biologics Control Act, introduced in 1902, was the first law that enforced federal regulations for the manufacture and sales of biological products such as vaccines in the United States. This law was passed in response to two incidents involving the deaths of 22 children after contracting tetanus from contaminated vaccines. This law opened the way for the introduction of further regulation. After this law, the Pure Food and Drug Act was introduced in 1906 and the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act in 1938. Now U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, supervises the Biologics Control Act. In 1905, a book called The Jungle, written by Upton Sinclair, helped catalyze public opinion for change. The book was written about the meat processing factories in Chicago. They explained how animals were slaughtered and processed in unsanitary conditions. They also explained the practice of selling rotten and spoiled meat produced from diseased animals. The writer also wrote that sometimes processed meat contained the residues of dead rats and even the unfortunate migrant workers who fell into the machinery. Due to the public involvement, government forced to bring the Pure Food and Drug Act in 1906. After this act, for the first time, selling contaminated and adulterated food or meat became illegal. Inaccurate and false labeling called misbranding and became illegal. Many products often contained alcohol, opium, or morphine and addicted many of their users. So the 1906 Act required the labeling of selected dangerous ingredients on all drugs. Now the word adulterated has been expanded to include products manufactured without following GMPs. The Pure Food and Drug Act created one of the first government regulatory agencies, now known as FDA. In 1933, FDA exhibited dangerous food, medicines, medical devices, and cosmetics to illustrate the shortcomings of the 1906 law. They displayed an intrauterine device, which could puncture the uterus if inserted incorrectly, a weight loss drug that caused the death, a hair remover that caused baldness, even without applying on the head, lotions and creams, those were having the potential of mercury poisoning, hair dyes, those were having the possibility of lead poisoning, an eyelash dye that blinded a woman. In addition to these, a tragedy was waiting around the corner that changed the entire pharma world. In 1937, a company manufactured and started selling elixir of sulfanilamide, a liquid form of a popular antibiotic available in tablet form. The company used poisonous diethylene glycol as a solvent for making the elixir. Unfortunately, more than 100 people, primarily children and elderly patients, died after taking the drug due to nephrotoxicity. U.S. Congress passed the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act in 1938 in response to this incident. By this law, for the first time, manufacturers were required to prove the safety of their products before marketing them. This law further empowered FDA to oversee the manufacturing and sales of cosmetics and medical devices. Also, this law authorized FDA for factory inspections, required standards for foods, and added injunctions to previous penalties of seizures and criminal prosecutions. About 300 people died in 1941 after consuming one company's sulfathiazole tablets, contaminated with the sedative phenobarbital. That incident caused FDA to relook manufacturing and quality control requirements. The GMP is born. The Public Health Services Act was passed in 1944 to address the concerns like control of communicable diseases and regulation of biological products. FDA mandated the batch certification by the agency for certain drugs during the World War II era. This practice was initiated in 1941 for insulin and 1945 for penicillin and later expanded to include all antibiotics till 1983. In 1955, Jonas Salk discovered the polio vaccine. Many manufacturers started manufacturing his polio vaccine. While manufacturing, one company failed to inactivate the virus completely in a lot. About 60 individuals administered these vaccines got polio, and another 89 of their family members contracted polio. Thalidomide, a sleeping pill, was manufactured and marketed, and used to treat morning sickness in pregnant women. When European regulatory agencies were permitted to sell thalidomide, they had no idea of its teratogenic side effects. Thalidomide caused limb deformities in developing fetuses. An estimated 10,000 babies with deformed limbs were delivered by the mothers who took this drug during the first trimester of their pregnancy. This is one of the biggest disasters in the pharmaceutical world. Two legislators, Kefauver and Harris, insisted more stringent amendment in the law that regulating clinical trials. The new amendment required new drugs to be tested on animals to establish safety before testing them on people. Manufacturers shall inform participants of a trial if a drug was for investigational purposes. It also required to obtain their formal consent before testing it on them. This amendment was known as Kefauver and Harris Amendment. FDA finalized GMPs for finished pharmaceuticals in 1963. During the decade of 1970, many product regulations were either introduced or amended. In 1976, the Medical Device Amendments, updated as a law, empowered FDA to supervise medical devices. This law was introduced as a remedial measure of an incident involving an intrauterine contraceptive device, which was being used by about 2 million women. Product withdrawn from the market in 1975, as it was associated with many infertility cases, pelvic infections, and some deaths. The intent of GMP for the medical devices, 21 CFR 820, was to govern the process, facilities, and control measures applied for designing, manufacturing, packaging, labeling, storage, installation, and servicing of all finished medical devices intended for human use. In 1978, an elaborated version of Good Manufacturing Practices for Drug Products, 21 CFR Parts 210 and 211, was published, and GMP Guidance for Medical Devices, 21 CFR 820, was made final. The Good Laboratory Practices, GLPs, guidelines were finalized in 1979 for conducting non-clinical laboratory studies. In 1979, more than 100 infants got seriously ill by a lack of chloride in 2 soy-based infant formulas. In 1980, the government passed the Infant Formula Act and authorized FDA to specify nutritional requirements. This law also authorized FDA to create and enforce requirements for the manufacture and commercial marketing of infant formulas. Now manufacturers are required to analyze each batch for nutrient levels, ensure safety checks, conduct stability studies, mark each container with a unique lot number, and maintain detailed records of production and analysis. The Food GMPs, 21 CFR Part 110, including special provisions for infant formulas, were finalized in the 1980s. In 1982, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman told her parents that she felt like she had a cold. They gave her an extra-strength Tylenol acetaminophen capsule. Within a few hours, she died. Similarly, 6 other people also died in this tragic incident, including 3 members from the same family. Johnson & Johnson recalled 31 million containers of Tylenol capsules, the largest selling over-the-counter, OTC, medicine in the United States. The investigation revealed that a criminal tampering of Tylenol bottles. The tamperer opened up the bottles to access the capsules and laced few capsules with cyanide. FDA issued tamper-resistant packaging regulations for the over-the-counter, OTC, human drug products and added them into the GMPs. U.S. government passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Law in 1983, making it a crime to tamper with packaged consumer products. FDA started publishing a series of guidance documents that have had a major effect on the interpretation of current good manufacturing practice. Guide to Inspection of Computerized Systems in Drug Processing, released in 1983, was one of the such document, which suggested early expectations for the functioning of computer systems and perhaps signaled the beginning of computer system validation. Between January 21 and February 7, 1986, 14 patients died in JJ hospitals in Mumbai from a cause totally unrelated to the diseases that brought them there. They died of poisoning by the adulterated glycerol given to them. The toxic adulterant was diethyl glycol, which was present in a concentration of 18.5%, over 3 times the lethal dose. Guideline on General Principles of Process Validation, which was published in 1987, outlined the expectations of process validation for drugs and devices. Such guidance documents are not legal requirements and provide guidance only on principles and practices. However, they reflect current thinking and expectations of FDA. A naturally occurring amino acid, L-tryptophan, used to be widely promoted as a dietary supplement and was used for insomnia, depression, obesity, and for children suffering from attention deficit hyperactivity, a DHA, disorder. In 1989, an epidemic of eosinophilia myalgia syndrome, EMS, was linked to dietary supplements containing L-tryptophan. The Centers for Disease Control, CDC, identified more than 1,500 EMS cases and at least 38 deaths were associated with L-tryptophan. FDA confirmed unknown impurities in the samples of some products of L-tryptophan available in the market. The API for this product was sourced from a manufacturer outside of the United States. More than 70 to 80% of the API used to manufacture drug products for the United States were sourced from outside the US, where manufacturing standards may not be as stringent. The United States and the European Union published guidance documents for the manufacture of API. The International Conference on Harmonization, ICH, published ICH Q7A on Good Manufacturing Practice Guidance for Active Pharmaceutical Ingredients. This document has been considered the de facto standard for manufacturing active pharmaceutical ingredients. Till now, whatever cases taken in this story were mistakes and/or mysteries, and there was no intention or desire of harming anyone by the individuals or companies involved in these incidents. The Tylenol poisoning case was clearly criminal. Let's look at a different kind of criminal case. In 1996, 3 executives of a company that made balloon heart catheters in the United States, each were sentenced to 18 months in prison followed by 2 years of supervised release for conspiring to defraud FDA by selling illegal heart catheters. The company itself pled guilty to similar charges in 1993 and agreed to pay $61 million for health fraud. It had been the first company to obtain approval to market a balloon angioplasty catheter in the United States. From 1980 to 1985, they were the only distributor of heart catheters in the United States. Heart catheters are used in angioplasty to clear clogged arteries. In 1987, the company began to redesign those already approved by FDA and sold the new version without obtaining approval. The redesigned catheters often malfunctioned, but the company failed to report those problems to FDA. The company learned during illegal human clinical trials that the catheter tips broke off in the arteries of 2% of patients, but they did not share this information with FDA. FDA approved the redesigned device in January 1989, unaware of the tip breakage problem. Within 3 months, the company received 33 reports of tip breakage, so it redesigned the catheter again without informing FDA, and in March began distributing the redesigned catheters. Upon learning of the malfunctions, FDA informed the company that its catheters were illegal and subject to seizure. In June 1989, the company recalled previous versions or models. When FDA told the company that its latest model violated the law as well, it recalled that model, modified it, renamed it, and continued to distribute it. When FDA told the company it needed a remarket approval application for the model on the market, the company discontinued selling it and reintroduced the original model, which had major problems that had necessitated the redesign in the first place. Finally, FDA seized all the catheters and witnessed their destruction. Those heart catheters were associated with at least one death and with emergency heart surgery for at least 20 patients. The Bioch-Shilly convexo-concave mechanical heart valve was manufactured and sold between 1979 and 1986. About 86,000 of those valves are believed to have been implanted in patients worldwide, including 30,000 in the United States. In a small number of cases, the valves experience a strut fracture failure that necessitates immediate cardiac surgery. As of November 1998, about 620 fractures had been reported to Shilly worldwide. In roughly 2/3 of those cases, a patient died following the fracture. In response to the Shilly heart valve and some other cases, government passed the Safe Medical Devices Act of 1990, for the first time giving FDA authority to go into R&D regularly. The act authorized addition of pre-production design controls to the CGMP regulations. When FDA analyzed device recalls over a 6-year period, they found that about 44% of quality problems leading to recalls were attributed to errors or deficiencies designed into those devices. When the agency analyzed software-related recalls, they found that over 90% of all software-related device failures were design-related, particularly the failure to validate software before routine production. In the 1990 Safe Medical Devices Act, government authorized FDA to make its medical device regulations more thorough and consistent with other world standards, such as ISO 9000. The act required nursing homes, hospitals, and other facilities using medical devices to report all incidents in which a medical device failure probably caused or contributed to a death or serious injury. The act required manufacturers of permanently implanted devices to conduct post-market surveillance and to establish methods for tracing and locating patients having those devices. The act also authorized FDA to order device product recalls. During the decade of 1990, the medical device regulations went through a major revision, with one major change being in design control, or the need to formally review and document product design at predetermined stages. In the late decade of 1990, FDA turned to a more directed inspectional approach to medical devices called the Quality System Inspection Technique, QSIT. That approach calls for focusing on several key systems, including management controls, design controls, production and process controls, and corrective and preventive actions. Also in this decade of 1990, proposed revisions to the GMPs for drugs and biologics were issued. The Electronic Records and Electronic Signature Final Rule, 21 CFR Part 11, requires controls that ensure the security, accuracy and integrity of all data and computer systems used. Published. Besides producing the API guide, ICH has been working on a number of quality, safety, and effectiveness documents. As these documents are adopted or made final by ICH, they become industry practice in all participating countries. The 1996 ICH E6 Guidance on Good Clinical Practices has become the de facto standard on performing human clinical trials. A number of other FDA guidance documents, including a draft guidance on handling out-of-specification results, recently became available. Even though guidelines and draft guidances are not legally binding, they represent current thinking on their subject matter and tend to be adopted rapidly and are viewed as current industry practice. Government passed the Generic Drug Enforcement Act of 1992 to impose debarment and other penalties for illegal acts involving abbreviated drug applications. The 1992 Act resulted from a bribery and fraud case, in which executives of few generic companies bribed FDA reviewers. They submitted the testing data of innovator product rather than testing its own generic version of a drug, and sent those results with a generic application. The names of all the individuals found guilty in the generic drug scandal can be found on the FDA website, and such individuals were debarred from working in the industry. The Scale-Up and Post-Approval Change (SUPA) documents presented on the FDA website explains on what is needed before making changes to an approved drug applications. The guidance documents provides a list of the types of information or studies required based upon the patient safety risk of proposed changes. The Indian FDA in Maharashtra, India ordered a nationwide recall of the antibacterial drug Comsat Forte, a brand of cotrimoxazole, of Boehringer Mannheim, India, Limited, when it was found to contain the anti-diabetic ingredient glibenclamide, as a result of mix-up in raw materials during the manufacturing. Rather than cure infections, the tablets caused a drastic fall in blood sugar and blood pressure. 62 people turned critical after using it at an eye camp in Ahmednagar on August 16, 1996, and 2 people died in Kolar, Karnataka. In 2002, GMP for the 21st Century, a risk-based approach was put forward for discussion and published in the US. However, this report was only later published as a binding requirement. FDA went to a new, 6-system-based abbreviated inspection technique, focusing on 2 or more systems, including mandatory coverage of the quality system, in routine drug manufacturing inspections. The other systems are facilities and equipment system, materials system, production system, packaging and labeling system, and laboratory controls system. FDA has announced that they consider a company to be out of control if any system is out of control. U.S. pharmaceutical group Schering-Plough Corporation, based in Kenilworth, New Jersey, accepted a fine of $500 million imposed by the FDA for violating quality standards. In 2004, tests showed that the pain reliever Vioxx increased the risk of heart attack. This finding resulted in the largest voluntary recall campaign in the pharmaceutical industry to date, with the company paying $950 million in fines and civil claims. In 2006, EU GMP guidelines were restructured. In 2007 and 2008, the anticoagulant heparin produced in China was connected with 82 confirmed deaths in the US and a number of serious allergic reactions, including 27 serious reactions following administration via injection in Germany. In 2009, a total of 84 children killed by teething medicine. From November 2008 to February 2009, 84 children in Nigeria died after taking pain medication. Another 111 children became ill. The medication was supposed to relieve pain caused by teething. The medication, which was apparently not tested sufficiently for interactions, caused kidney failure. It had to be recalled from the market. In 2010, hormonal preparation duodenine was long used as a pregnancy test. The compound was suspected of causing deformities in children. In 2011, EU GMP Guideline Chapter 4 is revised to elaborate the requirements of GMP-related documents like Site Master File, Pharmaceutical Quality System, Quality Risk Management, MRA Batch Certificate, and template for the written confirmation for active substances exported to the European Union for medicinal products for human use. In 2012, major raid were conducted against a Chinese drug counterfeiter. The Chinese authorities arrested 2,000 people suspected of counterfeiting drug products. The products were worth $180 million. The Drug Quality and Security Act was enacted by Congress on November 27, 2013. Title II of DQSA, the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, outlines steps to build an electronic, interoperable system to track and trace prescription drugs as they are distributed in the United States and to address counterfeiting issues. An outbreak of fungal meningitis was reported after receiving preservative-free methylprednisolone acetate injection. The medication was packaged and marketed by the New England Compounding Center, NECC, of Framingham, Massachusetts. The outbreak that began in September 2012 sickened 798 individuals and resulted in the deaths of more than 100 people. During investigation, investigators reported a series of deviations from their standard operating procedures, batch manufacturing procedures and sterilization procedures. In 2014, Chapter 2, Personnel, and Chapter 6, Quality Control, of the EU GMP guidelines were revised. In 2015, thousands of deformities were reported due to an anticonvulsant. This anticonvulsant led to serious deformities and thousands of children were affected. Chapter 3, Premises and Equipment, Chapter 5, Production, and Chapter 8, Complaints and Product Recall, and Annex 15, Qualification and Validation, of the EU GMP guidelines were revised. In 2016, EU GMP Guideline Annex 16, Certification by a Qualified Person and Batch Release, was revised. In 2017, a pharmacist in Bottrop, located in west-central Germany, diluted cytotoxic agents and earned an amount of €56 million. A new Part 4, GMP Requirements for Advanced Therapy Medicinal Products, of the EU GMP Guidelines was published. Annex 13, Detailed Commission Guidelines on Good Manufacturing Practice for Investigational Medicinal Products for Human Use, pursuant to the second subparagraph of Article 63(1) of Regulation, EU, number 536/2014, was published. In 2018, Annex 2, Manufacture of Biological Active Substances and Medicinal Products for Human Use, of the EU GMP Guidelines was revised, and Annex 17, Real-Time Release Testing and Parametric Release, of the EU GMP Guidelines entered into force. Drug products and medical devices are extraordinary commodity for the human beings to fight against the diseases, hence safety and quality of these products and devices are foremost requirement while manufacturing these products. Safety, purity and efficacy of these medicines and medical devices shall be established and ensured throughout its life cycle right from the development stages till it is released for the human use. In this story we have seen how GMP regulations has evolved reactively on tragedies one after another. Deviating from the established procedures are dangerous. We don't know that which one deviation can convert into the disaster. Hence one should never deviate from the specified procedure and specifications. Thanks for your time and attention. I'm sure you must have liked this video module. Please share your comment and subscribe to this channel and hit bell icon so you will get notification for my next video. The next video will be on scope of pharmaceutical regulation, what regulators regulates.